Hello there folks, my name is Spoonks and welcome back to another episode of Box Office Chat. This is the story break down the top 5 domestic box office results, see where each movie landed, and see how well each movie did. So let's get started. Number 5 was Killers of the Flower Moon, making $4.5 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $59 million and a worldwide total of $137 million. So once again, the movie holds very well. It dropped 33%, which is a very solid hold, still maintaining its core audience, and it is still a $100 million movie worldwide, which given the type of movies this is a pretty respectable total, to say the least. Still making that money for Martin Scorsese, and I'm sure as a test to see how these types of movies can play out, I'm sure Apple TV Plus is satisfied with these numbers. But in terms of making this money back, in terms of being a box office success, this is still far away from that. Again, this is a $200 million movie, folks, and it's only made less than half of that worldwide. I just think the budget for this was a bit too big, and I'm sure with this being originally intended for a streaming service, that would be fine, but this is the movie they chose to start off their new releasing method of putting some movies in theaters. And since this is a theatrically released movie, we got to judge it by the box office numbers. And unfortunately, it's not looking like this is going to be the big hit they were probably hoping for. I'm sure they were hoping that maybe some of that Oppenheimer money would spill into here, but it just doesn't seem like that's occurring. So again, even though for this type of movie, and the holds and the word of mouth it has had, these are good enough numbers, and certainly as a test to see how these movies play out, I'm sure this is a solid test. But in terms of box office success, it's looking rather unlikely. Hopefully things improve for Apple TV Plus in terms of box office success with Napoleon in a couple weeks. But as far as this movie is going, it's in terms of its success, it's not looking good. Number 4 was Priscilla, making $4.7 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $12 million, and that total stays the same worldwide as it hasn't been released in any international countries yet. So this movie had an astonishingly spectacular hold this weekend, as folks, this movie only dropped 5% in its second week. That's right, 5%. That just doesn't happen, especially for any movie in their second weekend. That is an astonishingly spectacular hold. It shows that the word of mouth is stellar on this movie. Many people are going out to see it wherever they can, and the movie's making a name for itself, which is always nice to see, like one of these smaller sleeper hits. It looks like this movie can replicate the success of Talk to Me. If anything, it doesn't make like blockbuster money and may not even be in the top 5 for much long, but it will still be able to hold well, have strong word of mouth, and make it a name for itself outside of the top 5. So things are looking pretty good for Priscilla in terms of word of mouth, in terms of box office right now. We'll see how it continues to do for the remainder of its box office run. But yeah, so far, especially with this hold, again, really solid hold here. Things are looking very good for this movie. Number 3 was Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour, making $6 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $172 million and a worldwide total of $241 million. So after a really solid hold last weekend, the film unfortunately took another hit. It fell 55% from last weekend, although there was stiff competition this weekend, so at least I can understand why this movie took quite a hit. And once again, it's not like it's hurting the movie by any means. Still, this movie is making so much money right now. In fact, it is just $2 million away from not only surpassing Indiana Jones, but also entering the top 10 highest grossing films of the year, which is absolutely insane to see, especially for a concert movie to surpass the 5th Indiana Jones movie. Like, imagine telling yourself that earlier this year, folks. And worldwide, things are looking even better. It's about to surpass the $250 million milestone worldwide, which again, for a concert movie is absolutely incredible to see. So yeah, like I've said many times before, Despite this being very front-loaded and the legs on it staggering, sure, the movie has still made a huge name for itself. It's still a huge box office success. You cannot look at these numbers and be disappointed at them. These are such huge numbers. It once again shows how strong of a name Taylor Swift has for herself and how big her fan base is and how it was able to bring in so much money for this concert movie. Pretty much nothing more else to say here except it's a huge successful film, and props to you, Taylor. Number 2 was Five Nights at Freddy's, making $8.9 million this weekend, adding to a domestic total of $127 million and a worldwide total of $252 million. So while yes, certainly holding much better than last weekend, it still took quite a big hit, 53% in its third weekend. I think they were hoping that maybe it would be able to pick up some steam here. Maybe some of the other diehard FNAF fans would come out and see this, or the word of mouth would be stronger, but unfortunately that doesn't look likely here. It doesn't seem like this movie's gonna hold very well in the coming weeks, but that shouldn't be a problem for this movie regardless, since it's already such a massive hit. It is already the biggest horror movie of the year domestically, and worldwide it is about to surpass The Nun 2 to become the biggest horror movie of the year, certainly. And looking where it's at right now, there's a possibility of it surpassing 300 million. It's just going to depend how long it takes to get there, but I think it's not out of the realm of possibility. It will be interesting to see how well this movie does this weekend with a new horror movie coming out this weekend. More on that later. But yeah, still, even with the not so great word of mouth, not so great legs, this movie is still a huge hit for itself despite the many problems. Like I said, bad word of mouth and the hybrid release definitely hurt this movie more than I think they were expecting it to. But yeah, still, given this is only like a $25 million movie and it's about to surpass 300 million worldwide, you can't be upset at these numbers. So yes, once again, despite not the best legs, Five Nights at Freddy's is still a huge hit. And finally, let's end the video off with the number 1 movie of the weekend, which was The Marvels, opening with $46 million this weekend domestically and $108 million worldwide. This is the 5th biggest opening weekend for a superhero movie this year. It was able to top Shazam! Fury of the Gods and Blue Beetle, but it still sits behind The Flash, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. It is also the lowest opening in the MCU's history. It was able to open below the likes of the first Ant-Man and the Incredible Hulk, which was released all the way back in 2008. So yeah, this is a pretty bad opening. I wasn't expecting much. If you remember from last weekend, I did not have the best hopes for this movie, but even I am a little bit surprised to see how low this movie opened. I was even expecting at least 50 million. It is a Marvel movie after all, but no, it couldn't even manage to get to that number, which is really unfortunate to see here. And of course, a lot of people are trying to figure out what happened here. A lot of people are saying it was the strikes, which I can understand. The stars weren't able to promote the movie. That is definitely a factor there. The factor that not a lot of people really liked the first Captain Marvel is also a good enough answer, I suppose. It hasn't had the fan base growth that some of the other MCU movies had, and also the fact that you were required to watch 2 other TV shows to understand a lot of what's going on in this movie. But I think the main issue here was just that not a lot of people were really that interested in seeing this movie. Every time like a new trailer would drop or something released for this movie, just nobody would talk about it. I even saw more people talking about whenever there was a new trailer for the new Ant-Man movie, and certainly for Guardians of the Galaxy, but for this movie it just didn't seem that there was that much hype or anticipation. Just a lot of the general movie-going audience just didn't want to see this movie, unfortunately. And I think it's the fact that these movies and shows Marvel is pumping out aren't as good as they used to be. Yeah, we had Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I know someone's going to bring up Spider-Verse, but that's its own thing. But yeah, obviously Guardians of the Galaxy. But we also had Secret Invasion, which sucked, and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which also sucked. So the quality has definitely gotten down. And like I said many times with stuff like The Flash or even Blue Beetle, if your movie is not great, people are not going to rush out to see it. And unfortunately, it looks like this movie is going to struggle a bit, not only because it has a $220 million budget, so even worldwide, this is a bad opening, but also I don't even think word of mouth is going to help this movie out. It got a B Cinema Score rating, the third in this franchise after Quantumania and Eternals, which, if you've seen those movies, you know you don't want to be lumped up with those movies. And comparing those, they also had some of the worst legs for a Marvel movie for sure. So, and with the huge competition coming out this weekend and the rest of the movies coming out, for Thanksgiving and Christmas, I think this movie is definitely going to struggle. I don't think we're going to see some very solid holds here. And unfortunately, it's looking like this is going to be a pretty big flop for Marvel, unfortunately. So yeah, not great things headed our way for the Marvels. The opening is bad and things aren't looking good on the horizon, unfortunately. Maybe it pulls an Elemental, who knows? Maybe it can surpass our expectations, but as I'm looking at things right now, things aren't looking too great. And those were your top 5 domestic box office results for this weekend, but we're not quite done yet, as we've got another week ahead of us and new movies hitting theaters. And this weekend, we have quite the weekend. We have 3 new major wide releases, obviously, to get a jump over the Thanksgiving holiday. So let's start with, of course, Thanksgiving. This is a horror slasher film based off of the fake trailer that Eli Roth made back in 2007 for Grindhouse. And look, I don't think this is going to be the next Five Nights at Freddy's. Hell, I don't even think it's going to be the next Megan. But judging from what I've seen, I think we could see some decent things for this movie. Horror has just dominated this year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just been a great year for the horror genre, and this looks like it's going to continue that trend. The marketing has been surprisingly solid. I've been seeing a lot of promos and stuff for it recently. The buzz does also seem to be there. I do see some people talking about it, getting interested, and even hyped up to see this movie for how ridiculous and stupid the premise is, and for the movie just rolling with it. And of course, given that it's the only Thanksgiving movie out right now, I'm sure that's also going to help this movie out plenty. So yeah, while I'm not expecting the next Five Nights at Freddy's, I think we could see something similar to Violent Night, a movie that has a pretty solid opening and maybe even has stronger legs that carry it to being a sleeper hit at the box office. So yeah, I'm expecting some decent things for Thanksgiving. Then there's Trolls Band Together, the third film in the Trolls franchise. I think this movie is going to exceed expectations as well. Like the horror genre, it has been a great year for animation. Outside of Ruby Gillman, pretty much every animated movie has been pretty successful at the box office. Even Paw Patrol was able to be really successful, and I think this is going to continue that trend. It's already released in international countries, and it's been doing very well internationally. And on the domestic side of things, I think it's also going to bring in a pretty solid opening number. I think, like what happened with Paw Patrol, I think people are underestimating how much kids love this franchise. I think a lot of kids are going to go out to see this. This is the first animated film since Paw Patrol, so I'm sure families are eager to take their kids to see something new just before Thanksgiving. The marketing has been superb. They have been doing everything to promote this movie. I've been seeing all kinds of promos and ads for this thing, and the buzz does seem to be there. People do seem to be interested and excited to see this movie. So yeah, I'm expecting a pretty solid number for this as well. Hopefully it can exceed expectations. Again, we can't really make a comparison to the predecessor since that was released at home because, well, but I do think this movie is going to do pretty solid numbers this weekend. We'll see how its legs are, since there is another animated movie coming out literally 5 days after this movie, so we'll see how those two face off of each other. But in terms of its opening, I think we're going to see something decent here. And then lastly, there is The Hunger Games: Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This is the prequel to the Hunger Games franchise, showing off the very first Hunger Game to take place. Now, I have very interesting feelings on this movie. I don't think this movie's going to flop or bomb by any means. I actually think it's going to have a pretty solid number. The marketing has been very solid, and because it was pretty much the first major blockbuster right now to get a SAG-AFTRA interim agreement, before the strikes resolved, it was able to allow its stars to promote the movie. They were able to go on press tours, talk about it on social media, and because of that, I think the movie's buzz and interest has grown significantly. I have seen so much more people talk about this movie and getting interested about it, and I think they may have waited just the right time. It's been a little over 10 years since the first Hunger Games movie came out, so I think enough people are going to be interested in seeing this. The problem I have with it, though, is the fact that it is a prequel to the Hunger Games, and I think that may have dampened the must-watch hypeability for this movie, because had this been like a continuation, a follow-up, a sequel to the Hunger Games, I think the must-watch hypeability of this would be much bigger than it actually is. Maybe get Jennifer Lawrence back. But as a prequel, people are like, oh yeah, I might be interested in seeing that. That looks pretty cool. So that's the one thing that's holding it back for me. But otherwise, yeah, I think we're going to see a solid number here for the Hunger Games. It's looking pretty good on my side. So yeah, I'm expecting a lot of good things for the movies coming out this weekend. But we'll see how well all these movies truly do, as well as the rest of the movies that land in the top 5 on the next Box Office Chat. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of Box Office Chat. What did you all think of the results? Were you satisfied, unsatisfied? Comment down below and let me know. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.